accustomed to calling names. He's a Harvard-educated man. Surely he knows his way around the U.S. vocabulary, but he chooses rather to embrace these kinds of dog whistles and bullhorns. I'm not going to follow him and Donald Trump down into the swamp of politics.
All right, that was Florida Democratic gubernatorial candidate Andrew Gillum this morning, reacting to remarks made by his opponent, who said Florida voters should not, quote, monkey this up by electing Gillum. I want to bring in now Jay Newton-Small, contributor for Time Magazine, and also with her John Nichols, national affairs correspondent. So you heard our conversation. I hope you did, at least earlier, because we're going to continue this now, starting with you, John. What do you make of Ron DeSantis' monkey this up comment? And of course, the Republican candidate running against Gillum. How do you see this playing out? And also this back and forth argument, some people claiming they've never heard that term before, that terminology, and simply saying, yeah, it's been said all the time.
Well, look, I've covered a lot of politics for a very long time, and I think you can see when a race is taking a very bad turn. In the case of the Florida gubernatorial race, you saw it the morning after the primary when Ron DeSantis went on television and used this phrase. The immediate response from the chairman of I believe the chair of the Democratic Party in Florida was to call it a racist dog whistle. And you've seen this response again and again from folks saying, you know, look, there's something bad going on here. Mm-hmm. You've seen concerns about robocalls, etc. And the counsel I would give you is that there is a great deal of evidence that the Florida governor's race is going to be the preeminent governor's race of this fall. It's going to give us the clearest choice between a young activist Democrat who rejects, full of Trump and Trumpism, and a Republican who really embraces it. We need, as journalists and also as citizens, to pay very close attention to this race because it does tell us a lot about where we're going. Mm-hmm. And frankly, I think national Republicans ought to be stepping up and distancing themselves from what Ron DeSantis is saying, because by any measure, he seems to be signaling a desire to run a race that could be incredibly destructive and incredibly crude.
Well, we heard that, as far as these comments are viewed as a dog whistle to rally racists. Mm-hmm. You have Gillum, who said this is just a full-on bullhorn. But I want to get your take on it, Jay, especially when it comes to this pushback on DeSantis. And here's what he had to say. We'll talk about it.
I am not going to apologize because I didn't say anything about race. It had nothing to do with race. It had to do with his far-left socialist platform.
All right, so you have the comments. You have him saying, I'm not apologizing. So what, Jay, does that tell us about this race in Florida? It's at this point now.
Well, Francis, this is definitely a page right out of Donald Trump's playbook where he skates right on the edge of talking about race, hints at it, alludes to it, there's these dog whistles to it, but then comes back and says, no, that's not what I was talking about. It's total plausible deniability. And that certainly helped get Donald Trump elected in 2016. The real risk here, though, is that if you overtly are racist, if you cross that line, for example, in Donald Trump's election, the Khizr Khan, the sort of Gold Star family that he insulted, that becomes too much, and you turn off women voters. Women voters won't vote, Republican women voters particularly won't vote for somebody that they perceive as racist, and so you have to sort of show that you're not racist, but like the way Donald Trump did in 2016 is sort of have all these sort of bells and whistles, dog whistles, I would say, like very under the radar, trying to be under the radar and doing that. What's not under the radar here, though, is the robocall that also happened this week against Mayor Gillum, that was crazy, overt racist, and that's something that I think everybody in the Republican side and the Democratic side has condemned. But that's again, when you link these things together, when it becomes a pattern, then it becomes really problematic for a lot of women voters because they just get this impression in their head that, well, he's racist, I'm not going to vote for him.
I have to ask you, John, I don't know if you saw our segment earlier with Sean Jackson, the Reverend Al Sharpton, among other people as well. Sean had said that this is not racist, and we're talking about he is also the head of the Black Caucus, the GP there in Florida, said, no, this is not racist at all. Is there any other way to interpret it?
I have a hard time interpreting it otherwise. I understand that people are going to debate it, and I respect that people will bring their opinions to this. But the fact of the matter is that Ron DeSantis has, from even before the primary, been sending an awfully lot of signals that, as was just discussed a moment ago, he wants to run a campaign that is very much like the campaign that Donald Trump ran in 2016. I don't think there's any way to look at that 2016 race for president and not see it as an effort to divide the United States in order to achieve a political end, and to use incredibly divisive, destructive, often racist and xenophobic signals to divide the country. I think we are seeing the Florida race begin to head in that direction. It may already be there. And what I would counsel is, if we don't pay serious attention to it, and if people don't push back on it in a big way, we run the risk of having a normalization of an incredibly ugly politics in this country.
Well, to your point, saying that this is the signal being sent, but Jay, to whom? To whom in Florida do they want to be receiving this signal?
Well, they want white voters to be receiving the signal, and certainly that's what drove out white voters in 2016 at record numbers. And so again, DeSantis is trying to play that playbook for Donald Trump. But again, with Trump, he had at some point to sort of go do that black church tour in Detroit to sort of say, look, I have black friends, I'm not racist, this is not something, he sort of had to walk that fine line to sort of make all of these dog whistles, but at the same point saying, no, I'm not actually racist. And I think that right out of the gate, to have this debate, like really just right out of the gate in Florida, sets a really bad tone for the race, and it means that this is something that's going to be a major issue for the campaign. And I think it's dangerous for DeSantis to play with this, because if he does, he really sets this up to be a very divisive race, but also a race where it's the whole center of it is about racial issues and about not the economy, not anything else, but it really sort of is about white versus black, and that's just an awful thing to run on.
Well, given that, if it's white versus black, John, do you think that this is uniquely a Florida thing? This is just contained in that state where you are, in Wisconsin, where the president eked out the win there? Could that, hypothetically, that same argument happen there?
I don't think it would play the same way in Wisconsin, and states are different. But I do think that states are battlegrounds in a broader national struggle to define what our politics is, what the limits are, where things go. And we are in a very rapidly changing moment, socially, economically, as regards our media, and a lot is up for grabs. I think in a state like Florida, the preeminent battleground state in the country, if you have a racialized campaign for governor, that is something that is deeply concerning for the whole country. I think you might see playouts of it in other places. And I also think it's important that we do keep some attention on Andrew Gillum here. He is trying very hard, it appears, to answer this racialization of the race, this kind of attempt to take it into places where it should not go, with a lot of serious responses, some humor at times. He's trying hard to keep it above a certain level. If he succeeds, that also is a signal for the country. So by any measure, what's happening in Florida is about much more than Florida.
And like we just said, this is just right out of the gate. Who knows what's going to happen next, leading up to November. And if these two guys get side by side, stand together during a debate, we'll say thank you so much, Jay Small, John Nichols. I appreciate your perspective.
Thank you.
Former White House insider says obstruction of justice charges